You know what's funny? Back in 2010, everyone was talking about this epic remake that was supposed to blow our minds with cutting-edge special effects and massive action sequences. Clash of the Titans came storming into theaters with the promise of bringing Greek mythology to life in a way we'd never seen before. And honestly, it did deliver some pretty spectacular moments, even if the journey getting there was a bit rocky. So let's dive deep into this mythological adventure and explore everything from the basic premise to the tiniest details that made this film what it is. The whole thing kicks off with a pretty straightforward setup that anyone familiar with Greek mythology will recognize. We're talking about the age-old story of Perseus, but with a Hollywood twist that makes it accessible to modern audiences. The film takes place in a world where gods and mortals coexist, though not exactly peacefully. The humans have grown tired of worshiping the gods, and the gods, well, they're not too happy about losing their prayer power. It's basically a cosmic temper tantrum waiting to happen. The story centers around Perseus, a demigod who was raised as a fisherman but discovers he's actually the son of Zeus. Talk about a family secret, right? His adoptive family gets caught in the crossfire between divine beings, and Perseus finds himself thrust into an adventure he never asked for. The city of Argos has basically told the gods to take a hike, and Hades uses this as an opportunity to gain more power by threatening to release the Kraken, this absolutely massive sea monster, unless they sacrifice Princess Andromeda. So Perseus has to step up and find a way to defeat the Kraken before it destroys everything and everyone he cares about. When we look at the main characters, Perseus obviously takes center stage. He's played by Sam Worthington, who at the time was riding high from Avatar's success. Perseus is interesting because he's caught between two worlds. He's got divine blood running through his veins, but he was raised as a human and identifies more with mortals than with the gods. Throughout the film, he struggles with this identity crisis while simultaneously trying to save the day. He's stubborn, sometimes to a fault, refusing divine help because he wants to prove that humans can stand on their own. It's noble, sure, but it also makes things way harder than they need to be. Then we've got Zeus, the king of the gods, played by Neeson in shining armor that's so bright it probably blinded half the crew on set. Zeus is Perseus's biological father, though he wasn't exactly winning any Father of the Year awards. He's powerful, he's regal, but he's also kind of stuck in his ways and doesn't quite understand why humans would stop worshiping the gods. There's genuine affection for Perseus, but Zeus is limited by divine politics and his own complicated relationship with his brothers, particularly Hades. Speaking of Hades, Ralph Fiennes brings this god of the underworld to life with all the dramatic flair you'd expect. Hades is the antagonist, but he's not entirely without reason for his actions. He's been stuck ruling the underworld while Zeus gets all the glory up on Olympus, feeding off fear instead of worship. The guy's basically been given the short end of the stick for millennia, and he's had enough. His plan to release the Kraken isn't just about power. It's about evening the score with his brother and reminding everyone that he's a force to be reckoned with. The relationship between these three characters, Perseus, Zeus, and Hades, forms the emotional core of the film, exploring themes of family, power, and what it means to choose your own path. Princess Andromeda, played by Alexa Davalos, is the damsel in distress, though the film does try to give her a bit more agency than the original myth. She's the princess of Argos, whose mother's vanity inadvertently triggered the whole crisis. Andromeda is brave and willing to sacrifice herself for her people, which is admirable, even if she doesn't get as much screen time as we might like. Her relationship with Perseus develops throughout the story, though it feels a bit rushed given everything else happening. Then there's Io, brought to life by Gemma Arterton, who serves as Perseus's guide and love interest. She's been cursed with agelessness after refusing a god's advances, and she's been watching over Perseus since he was a baby. Io knows the ins and outs of divine politics and mythology, making her an invaluable ally. She's the one who explains to Perseus what he needs to do and helps him navigate the dangerous world he's been thrust into. The supporting cast includes a group of soldiers from Argos who accompany Perseus on his quest. There's Draco, played by Mads Mikkelsen, who's the leader of these warriors and becomes something of a mentor figure to Perseus. He's tough, experienced, and pragmatic, representing the best of human courage even in the face of impossible odds. These soldiers provide the human element to the story, showing that ordinary people can be heroes too, even when fighting against gods and monsters. We also get some other demigods joining the quest, including a couple of hunter brothers who bring some lighter moments to an otherwise pretty dark journey. Their presence reminds us that Perseus isn't the only one with divine parentage running around causing trouble. Now, I mentioned Matt Damon and Ben Affleck in the original question template, but let me clarify. They're not in this film. That was just part of the template structure. In Clash of the Titans, we're dealing with a completely different cast. Sam Worthington carries the film as Perseus, and he does a decent job of portraying a reluctant hero who's angry at the gods and determined to make his own way. His accent wanders a bit throughout the film, which some people found distracting, but he brings a physicality to the role that works for the action sequences. Worthington's Perseus is less of a classical hero and more of an everyman thrust into extraordinary circumstances, which makes him relatable even when he's fighting giant scorpions and flying on Pegasus. Liam Neeson, as Zeus, brings gravitas and warmth to the role. Even when he's delivering exposition about divine politics, Neeson makes it engaging. His Zeus isn't just a distant, all-powerful deity. There's genuine emotion there, particularly in scenes with Perseus. You can see the regret Zeus feels about not being there for his son, mixed with pride at what Perseus is becoming. Neeson's commanding presence makes it easy to believe he's the king of the gods, and those scenes where he's literally glowing with divine power are pretty memorable, even if they're a bit over the top. Ralph Fiennes takes a different approach with Hades, going for something more sinister and whispery. His Hades emerges from shadows and smoke, always seeming on the verge of losing control. Fiennes plays him as someone who's been nursing grievances for so long that they've consumed him. The contrast between Neeson's bright, noble Zeus and Fiennes' dark, scheming Hades visually reinforces their opposing natures and the conflict driving the plot. The chemistry between the main actors varies. Worthington and Neeson have some solid scenes together that sell the father-son dynamic, even though they're not together for much of the film. The tension between Neeson and Fiennes crackles with sibling rivalry that's been brewing for eons. Where things get a bit shakier is in the romantic department. Worthington and Argos, as Perseus and Io, have decent chemistry, but their relationship development feels rushed. They have this deep connection because she's been watching over him his whole life, but we don't really see enough of them together to fully invest in their romance. Similarly, Perseus and Andromeda's connection is more theoretical than actually demonstrated on screen. The movie is so focused on the action and mythology that the romantic elements end up feeling like checkboxes that needed to be ticked rather than organic relationships. Among the supporting cast, Mads Mikkelsen stands out as Draco. Even in a relatively small role, he brings depth and intensity. His scenes with Worthington establish a mutual respect between their characters that develops naturally. The soldiers under Draco's command, while not deeply developed individually, work well as an ensemble, representing humanity's resilience. Their banter and camaraderie provide moments of levity between the intense action sequences. The film could have used more time developing these characters, but given the 2-hour runtime and everything the story needed to cover, they serve their purpose of showing that ordinary humans can stand alongside heroes when facing impossible odds. Louis Leterrier directed this remake, bringing his action movie credentials from films like the Transporter series and The Incredible Hulk. His approach to Clash of the Titans emphasizes spectacle and movement, keeping the pace brisk and the camera dynamic during fight sequences. Leterrier has a background in action choreography, and it shows in how the battles are constructed. The camera swoops and dives during the flying sequences with Pegasus, and the confrontations with various mythological creatures are shot to emphasize their scale and danger. His style is very much in the modern blockbuster tradition. Quick cuts, lots of CGI, and a focus on visceral excitement over quiet character moments. The screenplay was written by Travis Beacham, Phil Hay, and Matt Manfredi, working from a story by Beacham. They were tasked with updating the 1981 original for contemporary audiences while keeping the core mythological elements intact. The script takes significant liberties with Greek mythology, which purists might object to, but it creates a more streamlined narrative for a mainstream audience. The writers added the element of Perseus refusing divine help and wanting to succeed as a man, not as a god, which gives him a clearer character arc. They also beefed up Hades' role, making him more of a direct antagonist than he was in the original film or classical mythology. The dialogue tends toward the functional rather than the poetic, prioritizing clear storytelling over classical epic language, which is probably the right choice for the tone they were going for. Clash of the Titans was released theatrically by Warner Brothers Pictures, hitting theaters in April 2010. This was during the period when studios were aggressively converting films to 3D in post-production after Avatar's massive success. In fact, this film's 3D conversion became somewhat infamous because it was rushed, completed in just 8 weeks, and the results were widely criticized as being subpar. Many reviewers and audiences felt the 3D added nothing to the experience and actually made the image darker and less clear. The film performed well at the box office despite the 3D controversy, earning over $493 million worldwide against a budget of around $125 million, which was enough to greenlight a sequel. The story is based on the Greek myth of Perseus, one of the great heroes of classical mythology. In the original myth, Perseus was the son of Zeus and Danae, a mortal woman. His grandfather, fearing a prophecy that he would be overthrown by his grandson, locked Danae and baby Perseus in a chest and threw them into the sea. They survived, and eventually Perseus grew up to become a great hero. His most famous exploit was defeating Medusa, the Gorgon whose gaze could turn people to stone, and then using her severed head as a weapon. He also rescued Andromeda from being sacrificed to a sea monster, though the details differ from how the film portrays events. The 2010 film takes these mythological elements and remixes them into a more condensed, action-focused narrative that fits the blockbuster mold. The producing team included Basil Iwanek, Kevin Delanoy, and Richard D. Zanuck, with Leteria also serving as a producer. Legendary Pictures and Warner Brothers partnered on the production, betting that audiences were ready for a big-budget revival of sword and sandal mythology films. The project was in development for several years before cameras rolled, going through various script iterations and director considerations. The producers wanted to create something that felt epic and mythological while still being accessible and exciting for modern audiences who might not be familiar with Greek myths. They assembled an international cast and shot in various locations, including Wales and Iceland, to create the varied landscapes Perseus travels through on his quest. The inspiration for making this film came partly from the success of other fantasy epics like the Lord of the Rings trilogy and 300, which showed there was an appetite for large-scale mythological and fantasy stories. The original 1981 Clash of the Titans, while campy by modern standards, has a nostalgic place in many people's hearts, particularly for Ray Harryhausen's stop-motion creature effects. The remake aimed to take those memorable monsters and reimagine them with contemporary CGI technology. The filmmakers wanted to capture the spirit of adventure and wonder from the original while updating the visual effects and adding more intense action sequences that modern audiences expect from big-budget blockbusters. There was also a desire to explore the themes of human agency versus divine intervention, making Perseus's journey about choosing his own path rather than being a pawn of the gods. Beyond the main cast we've discussed, the film features several other notable actors in smaller roles. Gemma Arterton, who plays Io, was coming off appearances in Quantum of Solace and Prince of Persia, establishing herself as a go-to actress for action-adventure films. Her Io is wise and immortal, burdened with centuries of knowledge, but unable to change her own fate. Arterton brings a melancholy quality to the character that suggests the weight of her curse, even when she's being exposition-heavy and explaining mythology to Perseus. Pete Postlethwaite appears briefly as Spyros, Perseus's adoptive father, a fisherman who finds baby Perseus and raises him as his own. It's a small role, but Postlethwaite brings warmth and humanity to these opening scenes, establishing the normal life Perseus is torn away from. Nicholas Hoult shows up as Eusebius, one of the young soldiers who joins the quest. This was before Hoult became widely known for roles in Mad Max, Fury Road, and the X-Men films as Beast, so it's interesting to spot him here in an early supporting role. Luke Evans, who would go on to play Bard in the Hobbit films and star in various action movies, appears as Apollo, though his role is quite limited. Polly Walker plays Cassiopeia, Andromeda's mother, whose vanity sets the whole crisis in motion when she claims her daughter is more beautiful than the gods. These supporting players add depth to the world, even if they don't get extended screen time. How the actors handle their roles varies based on what the script asks of them. Worthington has the challenge of carrying the entire film on his shoulders, and he commits fully to the physical demands of the role. He's convincing in the fight scenes, whether he's battling giant scorpions or facing down Medusa. Where he struggles a bit is in the emotional moments, partly because the script doesn't give him a ton of material to work with beyond gruff determination and anger at the gods. His character arc is clear, going from refusing his divine heritage to accepting it on his own terms. But the intermediate steps feel rushed. Neeson and Fiennes are old pros who can deliver even clunky dialogue with conviction. They elevate every scene they're in, bringing Shakespearean weight to the divine family drama. When they're on screen together, arguing about humanity's fate and their own sibling rivalry, the film reaches its dramatic peaks. Argos does well with what she's given as Io, though her character exists primarily to provide exposition and emotional support to Perseus. She delivers the mythology lessons clearly and creates a believable connection with Worthington, even if their romance feels underdeveloped. Davos as Andromeda has the thankless task of being the prize to be saved, though she tries to bring dignity and strength to the role. Andromeda is willing to die for her people, which is heroic, but the script doesn't give her much to do besides wait to be rescued. Mikkelsen brings his trademark intensity to Draco, creating a memorable warrior character in limited screen time. His death scene, taking on a massive creature to buy Perseus time, is one of the film's more emotionally impactful moments because Mikkelsen sold the character's bravery and loyalty. The chemistry between actors works best in the action sequences where they're fighting side by side against impossible odds. The fellowship that develops between Perseus and the soldiers feels genuine, even if we don't get deep character development for each individual. You believe these men would risk their lives for each other because the actors sell the camaraderie through their interactions and how they support each other in battle. The divine family dynamics between Zeus, Hades, and Perseus have potential that's not fully realized. The script sets up interesting conflicts. Zeus's neglect of his son, Hades' resentment of his brother, Perseus' anger at being used by the gods, but doesn't give these relationships enough time to breathe and develop naturally. Now, the original question template mentioned characters like Captain Jackie Wells, Desi, and Jammer, but those don't exist in this film. Those questions were for a completely different movie. In Clash of the Titans, we're dealing with mythological figures and creatures, not modern police or crime elements. So let me talk about the actual supporting characters and creatures that matter to this story. Calibos is an interesting case. In this version, he's reimagined as Acrisius, Andromeda's father and the king of Argos, who was transformed into a hideous creature by the gods as punishment. Jason Fleming plays both the human Acrisius in flashbacks and the monstrous Calibos. His character has a personal vendetta against Perseus because Perseus's existence is tied to his own tragedy. Calibos serves as a recurring threat throughout Perseus's journey, attacking the group multiple times. The creatures Perseus faces are really characters in their own right. The giant scorpions called Scorpiox are terrifying obstacles that attack the group in the desert. These things are massive, with multiple tails and pincers that can skewer a person instantly. The heroes actually end up taming a couple of them to use as mounts, which is both ridiculous and kind of awesome. Then there's Medusa, probably the most iconic monster in the film. She's portrayed as a tragic figure, beautiful and terrible at the same time, with a serpent's body below the waist and snakes for hair. Her lair is filled with the stone remains of previous warriors who tried and failed to defeat her. The confrontation with Medusa is one of the film's highlights, a tense sequence where Perseus and his remaining companions must fight her without looking directly at her, using reflections in their shields. The Kraken itself doesn't appear until the climax, but it's been built up throughout the entire movie as this ultimate threat. When it finally emerges from the sea, it's absolutely massive, dwarfing ships and buildings, a towering creature of nightmare that's essentially unstoppable by conventional means. The design draws inspiration from various sea monsters and tentacle horrors, creating something that feels ancient and powerful. Only Medusa's head, which retains its petrifying power even after her death, can stop it. These creatures are what people came to see, the mythological monsters brought to life with modern visual effects, and the film delivers on showing them in all their terrible glory. When we analyze the plot progression, the story follows a fairly straightforward hero's journey structure. Perseus starts in the ordinary world as a fisherman, experiences the call to adventure when his family is caught in divine crossfire, initially refuses but is forced into the conflict, meets mentors and allies, faces tests and enemies, approaches the innermost cave when seeking Medusa, endures the ordeal of fighting her, seizes the sword by obtaining her head, takes the road back to Argos, experiences resurrection when he emerges transformed, and returns with the elixir by saving Andromeda and the city. It's classic Joseph Campbell stuff, which makes the story feel familiar and accessible, even with all the Greek mythology involved. The major turning points in the plot include the opening, where we learn about the conflict between gods and humans, then Perseus's adoptive family being struck down, which personalizes his motivation, his discovery that he's the son of Zeus, and the prophecy about his destiny sets up the central conflict. The decision to seek out Medusa's head provides a clear objective for the quest. Each encounter along the way, fighting Calibos, taming the scorpions, meeting the Stygian witches, entering Medusa's lair, represents an escalation in danger and a test of Perseus's growth as a hero. The climactic battle where he must reach Andromeda before the Kraken destroys Argos creates urgent tension, and his final choice to accept his divine heritage but use it on his own terms resolves his character arc. There aren't really mystery elements or surprise villain reveals in Clash of the Titans. The antagonists and their motivations are pretty clear from the start. Hades is manipulating events to gain power. Zeus is conflicted between his love for humanity and his frustration with their defiance, and Calibos wants revenge on Perseus for personal reasons. Where the film does have some twists is in how certain character relationships develop and the sacrifices made along the way. The death of Io comes as a shock, removing Perseus's guide and love interest before the final battle. Her later resurrection by Zeus feels a bit like having your cake and eating it too, undermining the sacrifice but it gives the film a happier ending. The revelation about Perseus's origins is handled early in the film, so it's not a twist for the audience, even if it's a shock to Perseus himself. We see the flashback showing how Zeus came to Danae and how baby Perseus ended up in that coffin floating in the sea. The prophecy that Perseus will defeat the Kraken is established clearly, so the question becomes not whether he'll succeed, but how he'll do it and at what cost. The film is more interested in spectacle and action than in surprising the audience with unexpected plot developments. Everything builds toward that final confrontation in a straightforward manner, which works for this type of adventure story, even if it means there aren't many genuine surprises along the way. One element that does develop in an interesting way is Perseus's relationship with his divine heritage. He starts by completely rejecting it, refusing Zeus's offer of a divine sword and insisting he'll succeed as a man. This stubbornness nearly gets him and his companions overthrown multiple times. Gradually, he learns that accepting help and using the tools available to him isn't the same as being controlled by the gods. By the end, when he rides Pegasus and wields Zeus's sword to defeat the Kraken, he's not abandoning his principles, he's choosing to use his divine gifts on his own terms, for his own purposes. This character arc could have been developed more smoothly with better pacing, but the basic trajectory makes sense. The technical aspects of Clash of the Titans received mixed reactions. The visual effects are ambitious, creating numerous mythological creatures and fantastical environments. Some of these effects hold up better than others. The Kraken is genuinely impressive in its scale and design, creating a real sense of overwhelming power when it emerges from the ocean. The giant scorpions look decent and move in believably alien ways. Medusa is probably the most successful creature design, blending beauty and horror in a way that makes her both terrifying and tragic. The CG work on her serpentine lower body and the writhing snakes of her hair is detailed and effective. Her lair, filled with statues of petrified warriors, creates an appropriately creepy atmosphere. Where the effects stumble a bit is in some of the compositing and integration of CG elements with live-action footage. Sometimes, the actors don't quite seem to be in the same physical space as the creatures they're fighting, which breaks the immersion. The hasty 3D conversion made these issues worse by adding an unnecessary layer of visual muddiness. In 2D, which is how most people watch it now on streaming or home video, the film looks significantly better. The action sequences are clearly shot and edited, allowing viewers to follow what's happening even when things get chaotic. Leterrier keeps the camera mobile, but not so frenetic that you lose spatial awareness. The cinematography by Peter Menzies Jr. creates a palette that's appropriately mythic, using lots of blues and grays for the ocean scenes and the divine realm, golden tones for Olympus, and darker, desaturated colors for the underworld and Medusa's lair. The contrast between the bright, shining armor of the gods and the gritty, worn equipment of the human soldiers visually reinforces the divide between divine and mortal. Lighting plays a huge role in establishing mood and signaling which realm we're in. Olympus is bathed in warm, divine light that makes everything glow. The underworld where Hades dwells is all shadows and smoke, with harsh light sources that create dramatic contrasts. The mortal world falls somewhere in between, realistic and naturalistic, compared to the stylized divine realms. The landscapes Perseus travels through provide visual variety. Beaches and cliffs, deserts with the giant scorpions, forests, the interior of Medusa's temple with its columns and statues, and finally, the city of Argos by the sea, where the climax unfolds. These locations, whether filmed practically in places like Wales and Iceland or created with visual effects, give each section of the journey a distinct look. The production design by Martin Lang creates a world that feels ancient and mythological, without being so alien that modern audiences can't connect with it. The costumes by Lindy Hemming differentiate between cultures and classes. The gods in their gleaming armor, Perseus in his functional warrior gear, the soldiers of Argos in their military equipment, and the various priestesses and royalty in flowing robes. The film runs about 106 minutes, which is relatively brisk for a modern blockbuster. This compact runtime keeps the pace moving, but also means that character development and world building sometimes feel rushed. There's not much breathing room between action sequences, which is exciting, but can be exhausting. Some additional time spent on character moments might have helped audiences connect more deeply with Perseus's journey and relationships. The editing by David Freeman and Martin Walsh keeps things moving, perhaps too efficiently at times. They cut between the mortal quest and the divine machinations on Olympus, which helps maintain the larger context, but sometimes interrupts the flow of Perseus's adventure. The musical score by Raman Djawadi supports the epic scope with orchestral themes that emphasize the mythological setting. Djawadi, who would later become famous for scoring Game of Thrones, brings a similar sensibility here. Big dramatic cues for the action sequences and more intimate themes for character moments. The music swells appropriately during triumphant moments and adds tension during the creature encounters. It's not the most memorable film score you'll ever hear, but it does its job of enhancing the emotional beats and making everything feel larger than life. Sound design plays a crucial role in selling the creatures in action. The Kraken's roar is deep and terrifying, shaking the theater or your home speakers. The skittering of the giant scorpion's legs creates an unsettling soundscape during that desert sequence. Medusa's movements combine slithering and the rattle of her snake hair in a way that's genuinely creepy. The clash of swords, the whoosh of Pegasus's wings, the crack of stone when someone gets petrified, all these audio elements help immerse viewers in the world. The mix balances dialogue, music, and effects reasonably well, though in some of the biggest action scenes, the dialogue can get a bit buried under the chaos. When Clash of the Titans hit theaters in April 2010, it opened to mixed reviews, but strong box office numbers. Critics were divided, with some appreciating the action and spectacle while others found it shallow and derivative. The rushed 3D conversion became a major talking point, with many reviewers specifically recommending people see it in 2D instead. On Rotten Tomatoes, it holds a pretty low critic score around 28%, indicating generally unfavorable reviews, though the audience score is somewhat higher, suggesting general moviegoers found it more entertaining than critics did. Roger Ebert gave it 2 stars, calling it a clash between what someone apparently thought was entertainment and what I thought would have been better. Common criticisms focused on the script's dialogue, which many found clunky and unmemorable, the uneven visual effects, and the lack of character depth. Perseus's character arc was seen as underdeveloped, and the romance elements felt tacked on. The comparison to the original 1981 film was inevitable, with some preferring the charm and practical effects of the older version despite its campiness, while others appreciated the updated action and scope of the remake. The 3D issue really dominated the conversation, becoming a cautionary tale about cynical post-conversion cash grabs. Despite the critical drubbing, audiences turned out in droves, curious to see the mythological spectacle, which led to it becoming a financial success. The film's box office performance exceeded expectations, particularly internationally. It earned about $163 million domestically and over $330 million in foreign markets, totaling around $493 million worldwide. This was more than enough to justify the production budget and position Clash of the Titans as a successful franchise starter. Warner Brothers quickly greenlit a sequel, Wrath of the Titans, which was released in 2012, with most of the main cast returning. The sequel addressed some criticisms of the first film, particularly avoiding post-conversion 3D by shooting natively in 3D, but it also underperformed compared to the first film, earning less at the box office and receiving similarly mixed reviews. So, is Clash of the Titans successful? Financially, absolutely. Critically, it's more complicated. It delivered the spectacle and action that many mainstream audiences wanted, providing an entertaining couple of hours of mythological adventure. For viewers looking for deep character development, sophisticated dialogue, or faithful adaptation of Greek myths, it falls short. The film knows what it is, a popcorn action movie dressed in mythological clothing, and mostly succeeds on those terms. It's not trying to be a prestige picture or a profound exploration of mythology. It's trying to show you cool monsters and exciting battles, and it does that reasonably well. The strengths of Clash of the Titans lie in its ambition and spectacle. The creature designs, particularly Medusa and the Kraken, are impressive and create memorable movie moments. The action sequences deliver excitement and visual variety, from sword fights to flying sequences to the Medusa encounter that plays like a horror movie within the larger adventure. The cast, especially Liam Neeson and Ralph Fiennes, bring gravitas that elevates the material. Sam Worthington commits fully to the physical demands of the role, making Perseus a convincing action hero, even when the script doesn't give him great material. The film moves at a brisk pace that never gets boring, constantly pushing forward to the next challenge or revelation. The production values, aside from the 3D issue, are generally solid. The film looks expensive and epic, with varied locations and impressive set pieces. The mythological world feels realized, with enough detail in the costumes, weapons, and architecture to create a sense of place. The attempt to update the mythology for modern audiences while keeping recognizable elements from the Perseus legend shows respect for the source material even when taking liberties with it. For younger viewers especially, this might be their introduction to Greek mythology, and it does capture the larger-than-life quality of those ancient stories. The sense that heroes could face impossible odds and triumph through courage and determination. On the weakness side, the script is definitely the biggest issue. the dialogue often falls flat, with characters speaking in exposition or generic tough guy lines rather than anything that sounds natural or memorable. Character development is sacrificed for action, leaving most of the cast as archetypes rather than fully realized people. Perseus is the stubborn hero, Io is the wise guide, Draco is the loyal warrior. But we don't learn much about them beyond those basic traits. The romantic elements feel obligatory rather than organic, particularly the connection between Perseus and Andromeda, which happens almost entirely off-screen. The film tells us they're meant to be together without showing us why they would care about each other. The pacing, while generally good at keeping things moving, doesn't allow for many quiet moments where characters can breathe and relationships can develop naturally. We rush from one action sequence to the next without time to process what's happened or understand the emotional impact. When characters die, we should feel something, but often there's barely time to register the loss before we're on to the next threat. The emotional beats the script aims for, Perseus accepting his heritage, the tragedy of Io's curse, the sacrifice of the soldiers, don't fully land because we haven't spent enough time with these people to really care about them beyond a surface level. Some of the visual effects, particularly the integration of CG creatures with live-action plates, don't always blend seamlessly. There are moments where actors are clearly reacting to tennis balls on sticks rather than actual monsters, and the compositing doesn't fully sell the illusion. The design choices for some creatures are hit or miss. While Medusa and the Kraken work well, other elements like the flying demons feel less inspired. The 3D conversion, though not an issue for home viewing, was actively bad in theaters and represents the kind of cynical cash grab that gives post-conversion a bad name. It added nothing to the experience and actually degraded the image quality, which is inexcusable. The mythology purists will find plenty to complain about in how the film handles Greek myths. The story conflates and changes elements from multiple myths, creates backstory that doesn't exist in classical sources, and gives characters motivations that differ from traditional accounts. Hades, for instance, isn't really a villain in Greek mythology. He's just the god who got stuck with an unpopular job. The film makes him actively malevolent and scheming, which creates a clear antagonist, but isn't accurate to the myths. Zeus's character is also simplified, made more straightforwardly noble than the complex, often problematic figure from mythology. Perseus's relationship with his divine heritage, the central conflict of the film, is a modern invention that doesn't exist in the original myths. Would I recommend Clash of the Titans? It depends entirely on what you're looking for. If you want a thoughtful exploration of Greek mythology with complex characters and sophisticated storytelling, look elsewhere. Maybe read the actual myths or check out more literary adaptations. If you want a fun, action-packed adventure with cool monsters and exciting battles, and you can forgive some weak dialogue and thin characterization, then yeah, you'll probably have a good time with it. It's best approached as a popcorn movie that uses mythology as window dressing for spectacle, rather than as a serious adaptation of ancient stories. For families, it works as an introduction to Greek mythology for kids, even if it's not entirely accurate. The action might be intense for younger children, but it's not excessively violent or graphic. The themes about choosing your own path and not being controlled by others, even powerful authority figures, are positive messages. The film shows courage, loyalty, and self-sacrifice as heroic virtues, which are good values to emphasize. Just be prepared to have conversations afterward about what the real myths say versus what the movie showed, because there are significant differences. For fans of action movies and fantasy adventures, Clash of the Titans delivers what you'd expect from that genre. It fits comfortably alongside films like Wrath of the Titans, its sequel, Immortals, Hercules, and other sword and sandal action films from this era. It's not as good as the best entries in the genre, but it's far from the worst. The creature encounters provide genuine thrills, the world is visually interesting, and the scope feels appropriately epic. Watching Perseus ride Pegasus into battle against the Kraken while wielding Medusa's head is an undeniably cool movie moment, even if the journey getting there had some rough spots. Comparing it to the 1981 original is interesting because they're such different beasts. The original has Ray Harryhausen's stop-motion creatures, which have a charm and craftsmanship that holds up despite being dated by modern standards. The mechanical owl Bubo is silly but memorable, whereas the 2010 version relegates him to a brief cameo because he doesn't fit the more serious tone. The original is campier, with broader performances and a lighter touch, while the remake aims for grittier action and more intense spectacle. Neither approach is inherently better. They reflect different eras of filmmaking and different expectations from audiences. The original is a product of early 80s adventure films, while the remake is very much a post-Lord of the Rings, CGI-driven blockbuster. For viewers discovering the film now, years after its theatrical release, the 3D controversy is irrelevant since you'll almost certainly be watching in 2D. The film actually looks better this way, with none of the dimming or muddiness that plagued the theatrical 3D version. Watching at home, you can appreciate the creature designs and action choreography without the distraction of subpar 3D effects. The movie works perfectly well as a Saturday afternoon adventure, something to throw on when you want excitement and spectacle without too much emotional investment or intellectual challenge. The legacy of Clash of the Titans 2010 is mixed. It was financially successful enough to spawn a sequel and demonstrated ongoing audience interest in mythological adventures. It contributed to a brief resurgence of Greek mythology films in the early 2010s. However, it's also remembered as an example of unnecessary and poorly executed 3D conversion, a cautionary tale about prioritizing gimmicks over quality. The film didn't become a beloved classic or launch a major franchise. The sequel underperformed and plans for a third film were abandoned. It exists as a moderately entertaining action movie that made money but didn't make much of a lasting cultural impact. Sam Worthington's career trajectory is interesting to consider. In 2009 to 2010, he seemed positioned to become a major action star, appearing in Avatar, Terminator Salvation, and Clash of the Titans in quick succession. While Avatar became a phenomenon, his other films received more mixed reactions, and his career hasn't quite reached the superstar level those early roles suggested. He continues to work steadily in action films and the Avatar sequels, But Clash of the Titans represents a moment when Hollywood was betting big on him as a leading man, a bet that paid off commercially, if not always critically. The film's approach to mythology influenced how later projects handled ancient stories. The emphasis on making gods and heroes more relatable and grounding fantastical elements in grittier action became a template others followed. Immortals, which came out the following year, took the mythology as action movie approach even further, with stylized visuals and intense violence. The trend toward making these stories darker and more serious, rather than embracing the mythic grandeur and sometimes silly fun of the source material, can be traced through films of this era. Whether that's an improvement over more classical or campy approaches is a matter of personal taste. One interesting aspect of Clash of the Titans is how it handles the gods' dependence on human worship. The concept that gods draw power from prayers and worship isn't exactly traditional Greek mythology, but it creates an interesting dynamic and raises the stakes. If humans stop praying, the gods weaken and fade. This gives Hades' plan more urgency. By terrorizing humans with the Kraken, he'll generate fear and desperate prayers, feeding the gods' power. It also explains why Zeus hasn't just smited all the rebellious humans. He needs them, and he still has affection for them despite their defiance. This symbiotic relationship between gods and mortals adds a layer to the world building that could have been explored more deeply. The movie touches on themes of free will versus destiny, though not as thoroughly as it could have. Perseus is told there's a prophecy about his fate, that he's destined to defeat the Kraken, but he insists on choosing his own path rather than following divine plans. This creates a bit of a philosophical question. If you fulfill a prophecy while believing you're exercising free will, were you really free or just playing out a predetermined script? The film doesn't dig too deeply into this paradox, presenting Perseus's rejection of divine gifts and his eventual use of them on his own terms as a triumph of human agency. It's a very modern Western idea of individualism applied to ancient mythology, which traditionally featured heroes who accepted their divine parentage and gifts without much angst about it. The representation of different social classes in the film shows everyone from gods to royalty to common soldiers to fishermen. Perseus bridges these worlds, born of divinity but raised in poverty, comfortable with common warriors but thrust into politics involving princesses and kings. The soldiers who accompany him on the quest are professional warriors serving Argos, but they develop respect for Perseus based on his actions and courage rather than his divine heritage, which he's actively hiding for most of the journey. This egalitarian angle, where a man's worth is proven through his deeds rather than his birth, is again a modern value imposed on an ancient setting. But it makes Perseus more relatable as a protagonist. Gender representation in Clash of the Titans is unfortunately pretty limited and traditional. Andromeda and Io are really the only significant female characters, and both exist primarily in relation to Perseus, one as the prize to be saved, the other as the guide and love interest. Io gets more to do, actually accompanying Perseus on his quest and fighting alongside the men at times, but she's still defined by her curse and her relationship with the hero. Andromeda shows courage in her willingness to sacrifice herself, but she has no agency in determining her own fate, waiting for Perseus to rescue her. The film could have easily given these women more active roles in determining the outcome, but it sticks to a fairly conventional structure where the male hero does almost everything important. Medusa is an interesting case because her backstory as a victim cursed by the gods for refusing divine advances is mentioned briefly, adding a tragic dimension to her character. She's both monster and victim, which makes her more than just an obstacle to overcome. The film doesn't explore this as deeply as it could have, but at least it acknowledges the tragedy of her existence. When Perseus defeats her, there's a sense that he's ending her cursed existence as much as eliminating a threat. The design of Medusa, beautiful above the waist but serpentine below, with the deadly gaze and snake hair, makes her the most visually striking creature in the film, and the encounter with her the most memorable sequence. The various mythological creatures serve as tests that push Perseus and his companions to their limits. Each encounter requires different tactics and shows different aspects of heroism. The giant scorpions test their combat skills and ability to adapt, eventually leading to the interesting choice to tame and ride these creatures. The Stygian witches, who share a single eye between them, provide information, but at a price, testing Perseus's willingness to negotiate and think rather than just fight. Calibos represents Perseus's personal stakes, a connection to his origin story, and a reminder that the gods' actions have consequences for mortals. Medusa is the ultimate test of courage, requiring Perseus to face someone who can destroy him with a glance. The Kraken serves as the final boss, so massive and powerful that conventional weapons are useless against it. Only Medusa's head, retaining its petrifying power, can stop it. This creates a nice symmetry where defeating one monster provides the means to defeat the ultimate monster, rewarding Perseus for his previous success. The image of the Kraken turning to stone and crumbling into the sea is visually striking, a satisfying climax to the escalating series of threats Perseus has overcome. The scale of the Kraken makes Perseus's victory feel genuinely heroic. He's saved an entire city from annihilation. The film's ending, with Perseus choosing to remain among mortals rather than ascending to Olympus, reinforces his character arc about human identity and choice. Zeus offers him a place among the gods, recognition of his divine heritage, but Perseus prefers to stay on Earth. He's accepted his divine gifts and used them to save Argos, but he hasn't abandoned his belief in human potential and his identification with mortals. This decision positions him as a bridge between divine and human worlds, someone who can interact with both, but ultimately chooses humanity. It's a satisfying conclusion to his journey from refusing his heritage to accepting it on his own terms. The resurrection of Io at the end is a bit of a cop-out, undermining the emotional impact of her death earlier in the film. Her sacrifice was meaningful, and bringing her back feels like the filmmakers wanting to have their cake and eat it too. They get the dramatic moment of her death, but don't have to deal with the consequences. Zeus's ability to simply restore her to life raises questions about why he doesn't do this more often for people who die unfairly. It's clearly done to give Perseus a happy ending with his love interest, but it would have been braver to let that loss stand and show Perseus moving forward despite his grief. The sequel, Wrath of the Titans, picks up several years later with Perseus trying to live a quiet life as a fisherman, raising his son. Of course, divine conflicts pull him back into adventure, and the second film focuses more on the relationship between Perseus and Zeus, as the latter faces his own mortality. The sequel attempts to improve on the first film by developing relationships more and providing better action sequences, but it didn't capture audiences' imagination the same way. The diminishing returns at the box office effectively ended the franchise after 2 films, leaving various plot threads unresolved. Looking at Clash of the Titans in the context of 2010 cinema, it was part of a crowded landscape of blockbusters competing for audience attention. It had to contend with Iron Man 2, Prince of Persia, Robin Hood, The A-Team, and other big-budget action films that spring and summer. The mythology angle differentiated it somewhat, and the recognizable story of Perseus gave it a built-in awareness factor. The casting of Worthington capitalized on Avatar's recent success, and having respected actors like Neeson and Fiennes gave it credibility. The marketing emphasized the spectacle and action, promising an epic adventure that would look great on the big screen. The film's reception illustrates the divide between critic and audience perspectives. Professional reviewers, watching dozens of films and analyzing them in depth, tend to focus on script quality, character development, and originality. General audiences looking for entertainment and escapism are often more forgiving of narrative shortcomings if the spectacle delivers. Clash of the Titans succeeded more with the latter group, providing the thrills and visual excitement that trailers promised, even if the story and dialogue didn't impress critics. This pattern repeats with many big-budget action films. Critical drubbing, but commercial success, because audiences and critics prioritize different elements. The film industry learned some lessons from Clash of the Titans, particularly regarding 3D conversion. The backlash against the poor quality conversion led to more careful consideration of when and how to use 3D in subsequent films. Some movies continued to do post-conversion successfully with more time and care, while others shot natively in 3D or skipped the format entirely. The cynical cash grab approach that Clash exemplified became less common as audiences grew wise to the difference between good and bad 3D implementation. This represents one positive legacy of the film. Its failure in this regard helped improve industry practices. For film students and aspiring filmmakers, Clash of the Titans serves as an interesting case study in both what works and what doesn't in blockbuster filmmaking. The creature design and some action sequences demonstrate strong visual storytelling and technical execution. The casting choices show how important star power and respected actors can be to elevating material. The pacing illustrates how to keep a story moving without dragging. On the negative side, it demonstrates the problems that arise when spectacle is prioritized over character development, when dialogue isn't given sufficient attention, and when post-production gimmicks are rushed to meet release dates. The film's score and sound design deserve recognition for supporting the visuals and creating atmosphere. Ramin Djawadi's orchestral score has appropriate epic sweep, with memorable themes that enhance emotional beats. The sound design creates distinct audio signatures for each creature. You can recognize what's coming by the sounds they make before you even see them. The mix of practical effects, miniatures, and CGI represents the transitional state of visual effects in 2010, moving away from practical effects toward more complete digital creation while still using real sets and locations where practical. Costuming and production design create a cohesive aesthetic that feels mythological without being historically accurate to any particular period of Greek history. The gods' armor is ornate and gleaming, almost ceremonial, emphasizing their otherworldly nature. The mortal warriors wear more functional gear that looks battle-worn and practical. The contrast between divine and mortal realms is reinforced through every design choice, from architecture to costumes to lighting. Medusa's temple is appropriately creepy and gothic, filled with columns and statues that create a maze-like environment where she can strike from anywhere. The film's action choreography mixes sword fighting, monster battles, and chase sequences to create variety. The sword work isn't the most sophisticated you'll see. This isn't a martial arts film with intricate fight choreography, but it's competent and exciting. The emphasis is on strength and determination rather than finesse, fitting Perseus's character as someone who succeeds through courage and persistence rather than technical mastery. The monster battles require different approaches, from fighting giant scorpions to navigating Medusa's lair to the aerial battle on Pegasus against the Kraken, keeping the action fresh throughout. Pegasus, the winged horse, gets less screen time than you might expect, given how iconic the image of Perseus riding Pegasus has become. The flying sequences are thrilling, giving a sense of speed and freedom as Perseus soars over the ocean toward Argos. The design of Pegasus is straightforward, a powerful black horse with massive wings, effective if not particularly original. The bond between Perseus and Pegasus develops quickly, without much time spent on their relationship building, but the image of them flying into battle together captures the mythological heroism the film is aiming for. The supporting soldiers who accompany Perseus deserved more development than they receive. Beyond Draco, they're mostly interchangeable, defined by one or two characteristics at most. There's the young soldier who's eager to prove himself, the grizzled veteran, the strong, silent type, but we don't learn much about them as individuals. When they start dying during the quest, we should feel the weight of each loss, but they function more as red shirts, there to show how dangerous the journey is rather than as fully realized characters we care about. More time spent on these characters, learning about their lives and motivations, would have increased the emotional stakes. The Stygian witches scene is creepy and effective, showing Perseus that sometimes cunning is more valuable than strength. These ancient beings share one eye between them, passing it back and forth, and they possess knowledge about how to defeat the Kraken. Perseus must bargain with them, threatening to keep their eye unless they tell him what he needs to know. It's a morally gray moment where the hero does something questionable for the greater good, adding complexity to his character. The witches themselves are grotesque and unsettling, their cave filled with magical paraphernalia and the bones of previous visitors. The jinn are another interesting addition to the mythology, mystical beings who serve neither gods nor humans, but have their own agenda. They're presented as ancient warriors cursed to exist in a state between life and death, their bodies kept alive through magic. They join Perseus's quest for their own reasons, and their presence adds an element of the unknown to the group dynamic. The design of the jinn, with their dark cloaks and magical abilities, sets them apart from the human soldiers and creates visual interest. They represent another faction in this world beyond just gods and mortals. The underworld scenes where we see Hades and his domain are appropriately dark and foreboding. Hades doesn't live in a fiery hell, but rather in a realm of shadows and lost souls, fitting the Greek concept of the underworld as a gray, gloomy place rather than a place of active torment. The visual design uses lots of smoke and minimal light sources, creating depth and mystery. When Hades materializes from smoke and shadows, it reinforces his connection to death and the underworld. The contrast with Olympus, all bright and golden, couldn't be more stark. The scenes on Olympus show the gods as distant and out of touch with mortal suffering, living in luxury while humans struggle. Zeus's throne room is magnificent, reinforcing his position as king of the gods, but it also shows how removed he is from the world below. The other gods who appear, Poseidon, Apollo, Athena, have limited roles, mostly standing around while Zeus and Hades argue about what to do with humanity. This simplifies the complex politics of the Greek pantheon, but keeps the focus on the central divine conflict between the brothers. The opening narration sets up the world and the conflict efficiently, getting viewers oriented to the rules of this universe quickly. We learn that gods created humans, that humans worship and pray to the gods, and that this relationship has become strained. The narration explains the war between gods and titans that came before, establishing that divine conflicts have massive consequences for mortals caught in between. It's functional exposition that gets the job done without being particularly artful, setting the stage for the story to come. Throughout the film, there's an underlying question about power and where it comes from. Do the gods deserve worship based on their might alone, or must they earn it through wisdom and care for their creations? Perseus represents the idea that might doesn't make right, that humans have value and agency beyond their usefulness to the gods. This theme resonates with modern secular audiences, even if it's not particularly faithful to Greek mythology, where the gods' power was simply a fact of existence, not something that needed justification. The film sides firmly with human agency and dignity over divine authority. The transformation of Perseus into Calibos adds a personal dimension to the conflicts. He's not just a random monster, he's a father transformed by divine punishment, driven mad by his curse, seeking revenge on Perseus, whom he blames for his suffering. This connection makes their confrontations more meaningful than if Calibos were just another monster to overcome. The tragedy of Perseus's fate, punished for trying to avoid a prophecy, transformed into a beast, losing his humanity, adds depth to the world's mythology and shows the cruelty gods are capable of when defied. The weapons Perseus uses throughout his journey reflect his character development. He starts with simple fishing equipment, not even proper weapons. As a soldier, he uses standard military gear. He refuses Zeus's divine sword initially, insisting on using mortal weapons. Eventually, he accepts Pegasus and the sword as tools he chooses to use rather than divine control he must submit to. By the climax, he's wielding both mortal and divine equipment. The sword Zeus offered, Medusa's severed head as a weapon riding Pegasus, showing he's integrated both aspects of his nature. Medusa's head, remaining powerful after her death, follows a classical mythology and creates the solution to the Kraken problem. The image of Perseus holding up the Gorgon's head to petrify the Kraken is iconic, drawn directly from myth, even if other details differ. It's a clever solution that rewards Perseus for his courage in facing Medusa. The trophy from that victory becomes the key to the ultimate victory. The scene where the massive Kraken slowly turns to stone and crumbles is visually spectacular, a fitting climax to the escalating series of creatures and challenges. The film's message about choosing your own path and not being defined by your parentage has universal appeal. Perseus could take the easy path, accepting divine power and becoming more God than man, but he chooses the harder road of proving himself as a human. This speaks to modern values about self-determination and earning your achievements rather than coasting on inherited advantages. While this theme isn't from Greek mythology, it works for contemporary audiences and gives Perseus a clear character arc beyond just completing physical challenges. Clash of the Titans works best when it embraces its nature as a mythological action-adventure and doesn't try to be more profound than it needs to be. The moments of spectacle, giant scorpions attacking, Medusa slithering through her temple, the Kraken emerging from the ocean, Perseus flying on Pegasus, are genuinely exciting and deliver what audiences came to see. When the film gets bogged down in clunky dialogue or rushed character development, it stumbles, but when it focuses on adventure and wonder, it succeeds. It's not a perfect film or even a great one, but it provides entertainment and spectacle, which is a legitimate goal for blockbuster cinema. For viewers approaching it with appropriate expectations, a fun action movie with cool monsters, not a serious dramatic work or faithful mythological adaptation, Clash of the Titans delivers a perfectly enjoyable experience. It's the kind of film that works well for a casual movie night when you want excitement without heavy emotional investment. The runtime is short enough that it doesn't overstay its welcome, and the pace keeps things moving so you're never bored. While it won't become anyone's favorite film, it accomplishes what it sets out to do: provide an entertaining mythological adventure with impressive creatures and exciting action sequences. The legacy of Clash of the Titans is as a moderately successful but ultimately forgettable entry in the mythology action genre. It made money and entertained audiences, but didn't create a lasting franchise or cultural phenomenon. It's remembered as much for its 3D conversion controversy as for anything in the film itself. For the cast and crew, it was a job that provided opportunities and paychecks, but probably isn't the highlight of anyone's resume. Sam Worthington, Liam Neeson, and Ralph Fiennes have all done more notable work before and after. Director Louis Leterrier continued making action films without this becoming his defining project. In the broader context of Greek mythology adaptations, Clash of the Titans 2010 represents the early 2010s trend of making these stories grittier and more action-focused. It sits alongside films like Immortals, Hercules, and the Percy Jackson series as part of a wave of mythology movies that updated ancient stories for contemporary blockbuster audiences. None of these films achieved the cultural penetration of something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or Harry Potter, but they demonstrated ongoing interest in mythological storytelling and kept these ancient stories alive in popular culture, even in altered form. For fans of mythology, The film might be frustrating in how it changes and simplifies complex myths, but it also might spark interest in learning the real stories. If even a few viewers watch Clash of the Titans and then go read actual Greek mythology to see how the film differs from the source material, that's a positive outcome. The film serves as an accessible entry point to these stories, even if it's not the most accurate or sophisticated adaptation. It keeps Perseus, Zeus, Hades, Medusa, and the Kraken in the public consciousness, which has value even for purists who wish it had been more faithful. The technological achievement of bringing these mythological creatures to life shouldn't be undersold. While the effects aren't perfect, creating a believable Medusa who's beautiful and terrifying, a Kraken of overwhelming scale, giant scorpions that move in alien ways, these are complex visual effects challenges. The artists and technicians who designed and animated these creatures deserve credit for their work, even if some shots are more successful than others. The evolution of visual effects between the 1981 original and this 2010 remake shows how dramatically technology changed in those 3 decades, from stop motion and practical effects to digital creation. Ultimately, whether Clash of the Titans is worth your time depends entirely on what you're looking for. If you want thoughtful cinema with deep characters and meaningful themes, skip it and watch something else. If you want a fun action adventure with mythological creatures and exciting battles, and you can forgive some weak dialogue and thin characterization, give it a shot. It's not going to change your life or become your favorite film, but it's a decent way to spend a couple hours if you're in the mood for spectacle and adventure. Set your expectations appropriately. Maybe watch it in 2D to avoid the terrible conversion, and you'll probably find it entertaining enough, even if it's not particularly memorable once the credits roll. Looking back at the whole production, you gotta wonder what went through everyone's minds during filming. Like, imagine being on set in Wales or Iceland, watching Sam Worthington swing a sword at a green screen tennis ball while someone off-camera yells, "That's the giant scorpion!" It's the magic of movie making, sure, but it's also kind of hilarious when you think about the reality behind the fantasy. The actors had to sell these reactions to creatures that wouldn't exist until months later when the effects team worked their magic in post-production. That's actually a real skill, being able to look terrified or determined while staring at absolutely nothing. The practical side of making a film like this is fascinating when you dig into it. They built actual sets for many scenes, which grounds the actors in something real even when monsters get added later. Medusa's temple, for instance, had real columns and statuary that the actors could interact with, even though Medusa herself would be entirely digital. This blend of practical and digital is where filmmaking gets interesting. You need enough real elements to sell the illusion, but you also need the freedom that CGI provides to create impossible things. Finding that balance is tricky, and Clash of the Titans doesn't always nail it, but you can see what they were going for. The stunt work deserves recognition too, because even with all the digital effects, you still need real people doing real stunts to make action believable. Those fights with Calibos involved stunt performers in creature suits or prosthetics, giving the actors something physical to react to, even if the final creature would be enhanced or replaced in post. The scorpion battle required wire work and choreography, where performers had to imagine riding these massive creatures while actually suspended on uncomfortable rigs. It's physically demanding work that doesn't always get appreciated when audiences are focused on the flashy final product. Filming in real locations like Iceland gave the movie some genuinely epic landscapes that you simply can't fake. No matter how good your CGI is, those volcanic fields and stark mountains provide a sense of scale and reality that digital environments struggle to match. When Perseus and his crew are trekking through genuinely hostile terrain, you feel the harshness of their journey. The weather wasn't cooperating half the time either. You can bet filming in Iceland meant dealing with unpredictable conditions, wind that messed up sound recording, cold that made everyone miserable between takes. But that discomfort translates to authenticity on screen. The armor and costume department had their work cut out for them too, creating everything from Zeus's blindingly shiny divine armor to the battle-worn gear of Argos soldiers. Each piece had to look good on camera, be functional enough for actors to move and fight in, and hold up through multiple takes and action sequences. Liam Neeson's Zeus costume probably weighed a ton with all that metal and decoration, but he had to wear it while delivering dramatic speeches and looking regal. That's not easy when you're sweating under stage lights in heavy costume pieces that weren't designed for comfort. The makeup effects, particularly for the Stygian witches and various other creatures, combined prosthetics with digital enhancement. Creating those creepy witch designs meant actors sitting in makeup chairs for hours, getting appliances applied, then performing in uncomfortable prosthetics that limited their vision and movement. It's a testament to the performers that these characters come across as creepy and otherworldly rather than just looking like people in obvious makeup. The collaboration between practical makeup effects and digital enhancement creates results that neither approach could achieve alone. From a filmmaking perspective, Louis Leterrier had to juggle massive set pieces involving hundreds of extras, complex creature interactions that existed only in storyboards during filming, and performances from actors at very different experience levels. Directing Liam Neeson or Ralph Fiennes is probably pretty straightforward. They're pros who know what they're doing. Working with younger or less experienced actors while also coordinating massive technical elements is a completely different challenge. You're essentially making multiple movies at once. The human drama, the action sequences, the creature encounters, and hoping they'll all come together cohesively in post-production. The second unit directors and stunt coordinators handled a lot of the action filming, which is standard for big blockbusters but means the main director isn't personally shooting every frame. This can lead to inconsistency in visual style or storytelling approach if everyone isn't on the same page. The goal is to make everything feel like one cohesive film, even though different teams shot different elements at different times in different locations. When it works, audiences never notice. When it doesn't, you get jarring tonal shifts or sequences that don't quite flow together naturally. Budget considerations always play a role in what makes it to screen versus what gets cut or simplified. With $125 million to work with, Clash of the Titans wasn't hurting for resources, but that money disappears fast when you're paying for international locations. Hundreds of crew members, elaborate sets, costumes, and extensive visual effects work. Decisions have to be made about where to allocate resources. Do you spend more on creature effects or on extending the schedule for actors to develop their characters? Usually, in big action films, spectacle wins that battle. which explains why the creatures look better than the dialogue sounds. The editing room is where a lot of final decisions get made about pacing and structure. The editors had to assemble footage from multiple units, insert temporary effects placeholders, and create a rough cut that would then be refined over months. They're working with the director's vision, but also studio notes, test screening feedback, and the reality of what footage actually exists versus what was planned. Sometimes, amazing scenes get cut because they slow down the pace or don't fit the runtime target. Other times, sequences that seemed great in script form don't work on screen and need to be trimmed or restructured entirely. Marketing a film like Clash of the Titans means creating trailers that showcase the spectacle while making the story seem more exciting and coherent than it might actually be. The trailer editors are genuinely skilled at taking 2 hours of footage and cutting together 2 minutes that make everything look amazing. They find the best action beats, the most dramatic moments, the coolest creature shots, and assemble them with pulse-pounding music and quick cuts that generate excitement. Sometimes, the trailer is better than the actual movie because it's essentially a greatest hits compilation without the slower moments in between. The poster campaign featured dramatic images of Perseus wielding his sword, the Kraken looming in the background, taglines about fighting fate and defying gods. These marketing materials set audience expectations for an epic adventure, and the film more or less delivers on that promise, even if the execution is uneven. The international marketing had to work across different cultures with varying familiarity with Greek mythology. So the emphasis stayed on universal themes: fighting impossible odds, heroism, spectacular monsters, rather than getting too deep into mythological details that might not resonate everywhere. The home video release gave the film a second life and allowed people who skipped it theatrically or only saw the bad 3D version to experience it properly. On Blu-ray in 2D, it actually looks pretty good, with strong image quality that lets you appreciate the production design and effects work without the muddiness of post-converted 3D. The special features on the disc editions provided some behind-the-scenes looks at creature design and stunt work, giving fans insight into how the movie magic happened. These extras are often more interesting than the films themselves, showing the gap between imagination and execution. Streaming availability has kept Clash of the Titans accessible to new audiences who might stumble across it while browsing for fantasy action films. It exists in that middle tier of streaming content, not prestigious enough to be heavily promoted, not terrible enough to be ignored, just sitting there waiting for someone in the mood for mythological adventure to give it a chance. This passive discoverability probably generates more views now than it did in theaters, as people casually watching don't have the heightened expectations that come with buying a ticket and committing to the theatrical experience. The film's influence on later mythology projects is subtle but real. The character design for gods and monsters established a visual language that subsequent films referenced or reacted against. The decision to make divine characters less remote and more emotionally accessible influenced how other projects approached gods and mythological figures. Even the things that didn't work provided lessons. The 3D conversion disaster taught the industry about the dangers of rushing post-production gimmicks, potentially saving later films from the same fate. For the visual effects industry, Clash of the Titans represented both an opportunity and a challenge. Creating photoreal creatures that interact convincingly with live-action environments pushed the technology and required artists to solve complex problems. How do you make Medusa's snake hair move naturally? How do you sell the weight and scale of the Kraken? How do you integrate CGI scorpions into desert footage so seamlessly that audiences forget they're not real? These challenges drove innovation and skill development that benefits the entire industry, even if this particular film's effects were mixed in quality. The composition of certain shots shows real artistry, regardless of whether the overall film succeeds. That image of Perseus silhouetted against the sunset, sword raised, or the Kraken emerging from stormy seas with Argos in the foreground. These are genuinely striking images that work as individual pieces of visual storytelling. A film can have problems with script and character while still delivering memorable imagery, and Clash of the Titans has several shots that stick in your mind even if the dialogue doesn't. Thinking about the theatrical experience of seeing this in 2010, you've got to remember the context. Audiences were still somewhat enchanted by 3D after Avatar, even though the technology was being misused. Walking into a theater expecting a groundbreaking 3D experience and instead getting a dim, murky post-conversion must have been genuinely disappointing. That negative first impression colored reviews and word of mouth, probably hurting the film's reputation more than if they'd just released it in 2D only. Sometimes, the smart business decision in the moment, converting to 3D to charge premium prices, becomes a long-term liability. The film's approach to violence and intensity is calibrated for a PG-13 rating, which means showing the danger and stakes without getting too graphic. People get stabbed and killed, but we don't linger on gore or suffering. The Kraken destroys ships and buildings, but we don't focus on individual deaths. This allows the film to be exciting and dramatic while remaining accessible to teenage audiences, which is important for a big-budget blockbuster that needs to appeal to the widest possible demographic. It's action-adventure violence rather than realistic or disturbing violence. Religious and cultural sensitivity around depicting gods could have been an issue, but Greek mythology is far enough removed from active worship that most people don't have strong religious feelings about it. Nobody's offended by creative liberties taken with Zeus or Hades the way they might be with currently worshipped deities. This gives filmmakers freedom to remix and reimagine these characters without worrying too much about backlash. The gods can be flawed, petty, even villainous, without sparking controversy because they're cultural rather than religious figures in the modern world. The educational value of Clash of the Titans is limited but real. Kids who watch it learn that Perseus, Medusa, and the Kraken exist in mythology, even if the details are wrong. This can spark curiosity that leads to reading actual myths and learning real history and culture. Teachers probably shouldn't use this film in classroom settings without lots of caveats about what's accurate versus invented, but as a gateway to interest in mythology, it serves a purpose. Anything that gets young people excited about ancient stories and cultures has value, even if it's not a faithful adaptation. Rewatchability is moderate. It's the kind of film you might watch once, enjoy well enough, but not feel compelled to revisit frequently. The action sequences are exciting the first time, but lose impact when you know what's coming. The thin character development means there aren't subtle details to discover on repeat viewings. It's perfectly fine background entertainment if it's on TV and you're channel surfing, but probably not something you deliberately pull off the shelf regularly. That said, specific sequences like the Medusa fight might be worth rewatching just for the visual spectacle. Comparing Clash of the Titans to other films in Sam Worthington's career, it falls somewhere in the middle. It's not as successful or impressive as Avatar, but it's more entertaining than Terminator Salvation. It showcased his action star potential, even if the material didn't let him demonstrate much range beyond gruff determination. For Worthington, it was probably a valuable learning experience and a significant paycheck during a period when Hollywood was trying to turn him into a major star. The fact that didn't quite happen isn't really this film's fault. Star making involves lots of factors beyond any single performance. The relationship between commercial success and artistic quality is complicated, and Clash of the Titans illustrates that disconnect perfectly. It made lots of money and entertained millions of people while receiving poor critical reviews and being generally regarded as mediocre. Which measure matters more, box office receipts or critical consensus? For the studio and investors, obviously the financial performance is what counts. For the filmmakers' reputations and legacy, the critical response carries more weight. For audiences, both matter. You want to be entertained, but also don't want to waste time on something truly bad. The phenomenon of hate watching or watching bad movies ironically didn't really attach to Clash of the Titans because it's not quite bad enough to be funny. It's just sort of mediocre, which is almost worse in terms of generating strong reactions. People passionately love or hate terrible films, but shrug at mediocre ones. There's not much entertainment value in mocking Clash of the Titans because the failures are boring rather than spectacular. It's not The Room or Plan 9 from Outer Space where the awfulness becomes entertainment itself. It's just a okay action movie that could have been better. For aspiring screenwriters, Clash of the Titans demonstrates the importance of character and dialogue even in effects-driven blockbusters. You can have the most amazing creatures and action sequences, but if audiences don't care about the characters or cringe at the dialogue, the film won't be truly successful. The script is the foundation everything else builds on, and a weak foundation limits how good the final product can be. No amount of visual effects or star power can completely compensate for a mediocre screenplay, though they can make a film commercially viable despite that weakness. The collaborative nature of filmmaking means hundreds of people contributed their skills and creativity to Clash of the Titans. From the director and stars down to the craft services team, keeping everyone fed. Each person had a job to do and most probably did it well, but the final result depends on how all those pieces fit together. A film is only as good as its weakest major element, and here the weak script drags down strong elements like creature design and production values. That's frustrating for everyone involved who did excellent work that gets overshadowed by the film's problems. Thinking about what a perfect version of this film might look like, you'd keep the creature designs and action choreography, upgrade the script significantly to develop characters and write better dialogue, give the romance more time to develop naturally, and definitely skip the 3D conversion. With those changes and maybe an extra 15 minutes of runtime for character development, Clash of the Titans could have been genuinely great instead of just okay. The bones of a good film are there, they just needed better execution in key areas. The cast probably has mixed feelings about their involvement. It was a significant project that paid well and kept them employed, but it's not the highlight of anyone's career. Worthington likely wishes the film had been better received to cement his leading man status. Neeson and Fiennes probably view it as a professional job well done, even if the material wasn't Shakespearean. The supporting cast got exposure and experience on a big-budget production, which has value regardless of the final product's quality. Everyone moved on to other projects, as happens in the film industry, where you're only as good as your next role. For Warner Brothers and Legendary Pictures, the financial success justified the investment and led to greenlighting the sequel. In the studio business, profit is the primary measure of success, and by that metric, Clash of the Titans worked. The fact that the sequel underperformed showed diminishing returns, suggesting audiences weren't passionate enough about the first film to automatically show up for more. This happens frequently with mythology and fantasy films. One does well, the sequel disappoints, and plans for a trilogy get quietly abandoned. At the end of the day, Clash of the Titans 2010 is a perfectly representative example of early 2010s blockbuster filmmaking. Big budget, effects-driven, based on familiar IP, entertaining but not particularly deep. Commercially successful, but critically mediocre. It's not the best film ever made, not even the best mythology film, but it's also not the worst. It exists comfortably in that middle zone of pop culture, recognizable but not beloved, profitable but not prestigious. Sometimes that's enough. Not every film needs to be a masterpiece. Some can just be a couple hours of escapist entertainment with cool monsters. And there's legitimate value in that, even if it won't win awards or be studied in film schools decades later.